0 clock, picture this. It's 776 BC. The sun beats down on a dusty plain in southern Greece, a place called Olympia. This isn't just any gathering. It's the dawn of a tradition that will echo through millennia. This is a story of the very first Olympic Games. 015, hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're journeying back in time, over 2,500 years, to uncover the epic origins of the world's greatest sporting event. Forget the billion-dollar stadiums and global TV coverage. The original Olympics were something raw, powerful, and deeply sacred. So, grab your toga, and let's dive into the incredible world of the ancient Greek Olympians. 045, before the games were games, they were a religious festival. The site of Olympia wasn't a sports complex. It was a sanctuary dedicated to the king of the gods, Zeus. The games were attributed to him, a way for the often warring Greek city-states to come together, lay down their weapons, and honor their shared culture and deities. This was so important that a sacred truce, the Ekacharia, was declared. Messengers would travel across the land, announcing that for 1 month, all conflicts must cease, ensuring athletes and spectators could travel to Olympia in complete safety. Imagine that, power sports literally stopping wars. Loni Treinta, so who were these first athletes? They weren't professionals, in our sense of the word. They were free-born Greek men, and only men. Women were not allowed to compete, and married women weren't even permitted to watch, on pain of death. The athletes came from all corners of the Greek world, from Sparta to Athens, Corinth to Thebes. They trained for months, often with a dedicated coach, driven by a desire for glory, not for money, but for honor. The ultimate prize, a simple wreath made from the branches of a sacred olive tree that grew near the temple of Zeus. But that wreath, that katinos, was worth more than any gold. It brought fame, respect, and a lifetime of honor to the victor in his hometown. 225 now. What about the events? The very first Olympic Games in 776 BC were surprisingly simple. There was only one event: the stadion, or the stade. This was a foot race, about 200 meters long, which was the length of the stadium itself. The first ever recorded Olympic champion was a cook from the nearby city of Elis, named Koroibos. He won that single race, and in doing so, his name was etched into history forever. Simple, right? But from that one sprint, an entire legacy was born. 307, as the games grew in popularity over the centuries, more events were added, turning it into a spectacular 5-day festival. Day 1 was for purification, oaths, and sacrifices. Athletes would stand before a formidable statue of Zeus, holding slices of boar's flesh, and swear an oath that they had trained for 10 months and would compete fairly, without cheating. The judges, the Hellenodikai, also swore to be impartial. This wasn't just a formality. It was a deeply spiritual commitment. 345 day, to brought the thunder of hooves with the chariot races in the hippodrome. This was the most prestigious and dangerous event. Imagine 4-horse chariots, thundering around a tight track, kicking up clouds of dust, with crashes being frequent and often fatal. Interestingly, the owner of the chariot and horses was declared the winner, not the driver. This meant a wealthy owner, even a woman, could become an Olympic champion without ever setting foot in the arena. 422, after the chariots came the legendary pentathlon, the ultimate test of an all-around athlete. It consisted of 5 events: the discus throw, the long jump, the javelin throw, a running race, and wrestling. To win, an athlete had to be not just strong, but agile, fast, and skilled across the board. The discus was a heavy disc of stone or bronze. The long jump was unique. Athletes used handheld weights called halters to propel themselves further, and the javelin wasn't just for distance, but also for accuracy. 505 Day 3 was the religious climax of the festival. A grand procession of judges, athletes, and ambassadors would walk to the great altar of Zeus. Here, 100 oxen were sacrificed in his honor. The thighs were burned as an offering to the god, while the rest of the meat was prepared for a massive public feast later that day. It was a powerful reminder that at its heart, the Olympics were a sacred ceremony, a spectacle of piety as much as sport. 540 Day 4 was for the real brute force events. It started with more foot races, including the Dialos, a 400-meter race, and the Dalakos, a long-distance race, of about 5 kilometers. Then came the combat sports: boxing, wrestling, and the pankration. Ancient boxing, or pygmachia, was brutal. The fighters wrapped their hands in leather thongs, and there were no rounds and no weight classes. The fight only ended when one man surrendered or was knocked out. Ludianarschaffen. Wrestling, or pale, was a contest of strength and technique. The goal was to throw your opponent to the ground 3 times. There was no ground wrestling like we see today. It was all about throws from a standing position. But the most extreme event of all was the pankration. It was a no-holds-barred combat sport, a mix of boxing and wrestling. Almost anything was allowed: kicking, punching, chokeholds. The only rules were no biting and no gouging out your opponent's eyes. It was the ultimate test of strength and endurance, and its champions were revered as heroes. 7:05 on the final day, day 5. It was all about celebration and honor. The victors were presented with their olive wreaths and red woolen ribbons in front of the temple of Zeus. They became celebrities overnight. Poets would write odes in their honor. Sculptors would create statues of them, and their hometowns would often reward them with free meals for life, or even tear down a section of the city. Walls for them to enter through, symbolizing that a city with such an athlete needed no walls for protection. The glory was immense and eternal. 7:45, so what was it like to actually be there? Imagine thousands of people from all over Greece, camping out under the stars. The air is filled with the smell of roasting meat and incense. You hear a dozen different dialects being spoken. There are merchants selling food and trinkets, philosophers like Plato and Aristotle debating in the shade, and historians like Herodotus reciting their latest works. It was a cultural hub, a massive social gathering where business deals were made. Treaties were negotiated, and art was celebrated alongside athletics. The Olympics were the heartbeat of ancient Greek society. 830 to 4 over 1,000 years. The games continued, held every 4 years, creating a cycle known as an Olympiad, which became a basis for timekeeping across Greece. But all good things must come to an end. As the Roman Empire rose and Christianity became the state religion, the old pagan festivals fell out of favor. In 393 AD, the Roman Emperor Theodosius I, a Christian, banned all pagan cults and festivals. The ancient Olympic Games, after nearly 12 centuries, were no more. The temples were torn down, the stadium was buried by earthquakes and river floods, and Olympia was lost to the world for over 1,000 years. 920, but the spirit of the Olympics could not be extinguished. In the late 19th century, inspired by the ancient ideal, a Frenchman named Baron Pierre de Coubertin spearheaded a movement to revive the games. And in 1896, in Athens, the capital of Greece, the first modern Olympic Games were held, reigniting a flame that had been dormant for 1,500 years. 947, from a single-foot race in a dusty field to a global spectacle of human achievement. The story of the Olympics is a story about us. It's about our drive to compete, our need for community, and our pursuit of excellence. The ancient athletes may be long gone, but their legacy lives on every time an athlete pushes their limits for a shot at glory. 1010, thank you so much for journeying back in time with me today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next historical adventure. What's your favorite Olympic event, ancient or modern? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious.